So the clap helps, doesn't it? Because you don't know how to get started until you clap.
Anyway, how has your day been, John?
Pretty good. I'm getting ready for a trip to Canada, so I got a haircut for some reason. Last time I was in Canada, it was so cold, my beard froze. Like I washed my face and walked out too soon.
Yeah.
And just my whole face was covered in ice. So
that's crazy. I've never experienced cold like that.
Yeah. So I'm about to go back. I don't think it's that cold right now. It's a good time of the year to go. But yeah, been getting ready for that. Some lining up meetings with a lot of people there. Some of the universities we work with. We have a lot of traction in Canada. Sort of coincidentally, but just like a snowball effect, right? You get 2 or 3 and then it turns into 6 or 7.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'm going to go and show a bunch of the AI features we've been developing. It's the sort of thing I like to show people in person, and I sort of feel the waters with some of our customers before I talk about AI, because it can seem like, look at me segueing into today's topic, it can seem like a buzzword or jumping on trends if you don't have all the knowledge and the context, or the, are we using it in the right way? Are we using it effectively? Are we compromising on privacy or security for no real benefit? I always say, like, privacy is a spend. So if you spend it to get the best feature, is it worth spending that privacy? All of these things is sort of related to what we want to talk about today, which is, do you need AI? When is the key question? When should you use AI? And when does, like, logic and conditional programming work better for the situation? So that's the umbrella of what to chat about today.
Yeah. And I guess when you're demoing something, you can show how it should be used. Like, this is a useful situation for using AI versus we're going to use AI for everything.
Yeah.
And try and hamstring it into somebody's workflow.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of companies trying to, like, force AI into their product because of this trend. And it could be, as simple as trying to get attention with their marketing, or trying to get investors, so they think they have to make everything, like, on trend for the investors. And sometimes you do. Some of these VC firms are just trend followers in some ways. Not all of them, but some of the ones I've seen and met with. But AI isn't for some conditional based logic, like, you don't need AI, right? Like, you can just sort of say, when this happens, do that, and that's much more efficient if you know exactly what those conditions and actions are going to be.
Yeah, less error prone, more efficient.
Yeah,
and as you're talking about security and privacy and all those things, it's a lot harder to contain when it's AI driven. Yeah,
but there's obviously reasons and benefits for AI. One of the examples I think of when, like, there's a company I saw that, you've got to be careful how I describe it without giving away who I'm thinking of, but there's a company I came across that uses AI to make selections on what coffee beans to send you, where that could just be a survey. Like, if you have to answer survey questions,
and then based on what stock you have.
Yeah, exactly. So the results can be conditional based. Like, if I have this stock, if the customer likes this flavor profile, send them these beans. I could not see any reason for the AI, and I only saw negative impact for that particular business. Their expense, their engineering, their architecture is just much more complicated than it needs to be.
Customer getting beans they don't like every week.
Yeah,
because
there's not enough,
always the same.
There's not enough data, or there's only 5 or 6 options anyway. Like, unless it's creating the coffee beans from scratch, or using your DNA, I don't know. Like, what they are trying to achieve, it just wasn't worth it. So, let me ask you the question, like, when it comes to our area of, like, smart buildings and smart workplace, when does AI make the most sense? When should one consider it for their solution?
Yeah, so I guess AI should really only be used when you need something that is difficult to describe in a programmatic sense. So, I mean, the best use case for AI is just voice interfaces, or you want to talk to something and it know what to do and perform those actions, especially when those actions might be complicated. So you might need to learn 6 UIs to achieve something that you could just tell somebody in AI, and it works out the details. So that's probably the best use case, just human interaction. And then the next ones are just fuzzy logic, really. Or if you want to be lazy with requirements. So you can have a bunch of requirements that are just human written, easy to read, and an output that needs to change based on those requirements, but it's hard to sort of define what the requirements are.
Yeah. I guess that's the opposite of this phrasing I'm using of conditional-based logic, right? Like that's where you know exactly like what's going to happen when a certain threshold or trigger is met, which is still extremely useful. AI doesn't replace the need for that, but maybe in terms of the way humans interface with the input trigger, perhaps, like some of the output can be defined, but
the output could be AI. You can have all these solid triggers, like actions occurring in a building, for instance, and then you could just say, if these certain conditions are met, then I want you to look at something else, like a camera feed or something.
Yes.
And decide, is there an issue? Raise the alarm, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you've got all this input that decides when an AI should take over. And maybe even that's sort of conditional. You say, like, well, if we're going 20% over the average, then get an AI in before escalating, just to try and reduce the amount of human time wasted.
Let's talk about something really specific, desk booking. So a lot of corporate workplaces, particularly since COVID, have implemented desk booking. So not just hot desking, but you actually have to book ahead of time, or select, tell the system you're coming into the office, and I might give you the desk on approach or on arrival. There's many different ways of doing it. But we had one client run a proof of concept with a third-party provider that was desk booking powered by AI. It didn't work out. They didn't end up selecting this. But my gut feeling is it just wasn't necessary because you just want to select a desk and book it, right? Perhaps you don't need AI for that scenario.
Yeah, or you want to be next to somebody and you know where they sit, or you want to be with your team, but then the human interface to the AI is too complicated to actually describe what you want for it to accurately achieve the goal. It's like if you just want a desk, any desk, and maybe the AI has enough context to know your team is on, most of your team's on this level, or something like that, and puts you with your team.
But all of that could be logic.
I mean, exactly. So we have an AI interface for desk booking, but it's more simplistic. So it's just like, I need a desk for tomorrow, and you can offhandedly tell an AI that, and it'll go work it out,
and work out all your context. So like, which office are you going to be in, and what's your schedule that day? What meetings do you have? What meeting room is that meeting in? So I can book a desk near
the floor. But if you want, there's other organizations have asked us to do desk booking that's slightly automated, which is where they can't select a desk, and then we organically put them next to their colleagues.
Yes.
And so that's sort of like an organic growth model, where effectively we're just putting the first person to book in that team will be randomly placed on a floor, and that can either be as far away from anyone as possible or as close to other people as possible, depending on how you want to balance things. And then as more people from that team request a desk, it puts them near that person, which is just organically forming the various sections of an office. And I guess those clients always want to say this floor is for marketing and sales or something, and this floor is for devs and things like that. But then the sub teams grow organically on those floors.
The integration is really important there. So knowing that information from records of truth, from Active Directory, from HR systems that might tell us what teams people are in, not just what departments they're in, or that sort of integration feeds the logic that we can do that with, without necessarily needing AI to do that. It's a logic-based scenario.
Yeah, and it's like 99% logic, even if you put AI on it, right?
Yeah.
But if AI is the only interface, then it can be jarring.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I like that scenario, like the logic-based approach, because it's maximizing real estate. Like if you're allocating space essentially just in time, then, and taking into account the the organic growth of where people are and the capacities, then you can sort of direct people to the right space without people being able to book anywhere. Yeah. And that problem of 30% of your utilization spread across 100% of your workplace, meaning you're consuming as if 100% of the people are there with your energy, your lights, your air conditioning. Then we can solve that if we're just allocating people space with logic, and maybe with AI as an interface.
Yeah. And I mean, other things that AI might struggle with are sort of like proximity to other people. Like if it's just got desk IDs but doesn't really know how they're geographically laid out, it might make mistakes.
Unless you're training the floor plan itself, right? You could have that as input for
but then your AI is getting more and more complicated. Whereas we on the front end use the like edge computing power of the person's device to work out distance. So the back end can be like, here's some candidates, and then the front end can be like, okay, this doesn't meet the requirements or does meet the requirements.
Yeah, and over engineering something as simple as desk booking, like it's such a, it's almost like for some reason it's reminding me of the quantitative fallacy. So like when you measure something, it becomes the focus. I feel like people are out there looking for desk booking solutions, and it's becoming the focus of like commercial real estate, where there's so many bigger problems, and they're putting desk booking and availability at the forefront of the problems in the building, and it's not necessarily the problem, or the complicated solutions don't solve any problems. So it's like it's an interesting time now where like people are tacking on AI to their solutions for things like that, where like you're sort of creating the need. The supply and demand is off here, I think.
I mean, it kind of makes sense because most workplaces now have under capacity or over under supply, over demand, or whatever. So not everyone could go to work on the same day. So then they need a creative solution to solve that, and maybe they're just throwing AI at it without looking at how you could integrate other aspects of the workplace and business to provide a better solution.
100%. So like the problem doesn't lie within the physical desk. It's like a change management problem. It's a cultural problem internally. It's like there's so many moving parts to it than just the physical desks. And I think AI can play a role in these other areas where it is more appropriate to solve the problem further down the line. It's smaller changes further down the line make a bigger impact.
And mostly it's just interface. Like the AI just needs to understand what you want and then interact with the system that isn't AI to perform the job that you actually want it to do.
But let's touch on that fuzzy logic, like the one of the strong reasons for AI. So if we expose like desk booking and all of our functions to AI, it can work out when to make those logic calls, right? It can go through the logic conditional based programming without you having to tell it to. And I think that's a powerful use of AI.
And that's just the human interface, really. So you're saying, here's all the things that the building can do, and the AI just knows that. And then you ask, I want to book a desk. And just based on the functions available, it knows, there's a schedule available, so it goes, checks your schedule, can work out what floor you're on based on that. see if there's any desks available on that floor. If not, try other floors. So some of that's a bit of prompting. So you could be like, optimal workflows would be something like this as a system prompt to the AI, just so that it really smooths out that experience.
Yeah.
But it's pretty good at just working out those logical connections itself.
Yeah. Yeah, almost like programming on the fly.
Mm.
You know, like the end user's asking a question. It's like, let me program that for you.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that's the stuff that's like mind blowing to me still. Like when I, you know, the AI that you've created for PlaceOS, when I see the feedback where it's sort of telling you what it's doing, and it's basically like, oh, I'm going into this API and doing this. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Oh, I got this error. I wonder what that is. Okay.
I'll try something else.
I'll fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's seeing that really helped me get my head around the whole concept of AI. You know, when you sort of see it yourself happening in that way, rather than just like a lot of people's interaction with more generic,
just knowledge base. Yeah.
Exactly. What's some other? Have you seen any dumb examples of company plus AI?
I should have thought about this earlier. I mean, I feel like we can look at the limits, like where the boundaries are for logic and AI. Like things like chess is sort of like that boundary where you can do it without AI, and you can almost do it better than AI, depending on your memory and CPU. But then AI works quite well for chess. And then you look at Go, and you have to use AI. Like it's impossible to use traditional logic programming.
Yep.
And I guess that's like, as soon as complexity becomes high, you need AI. But where complexity is low, and I guess one of the mistakes a lot of people think AI will be good for is something like analytics.
Yeah.
Where they're like, oh, just throw data into a bucket, unstructured data, and let the AI work out what the data is. And it'll just never work it out. Like it might find some patterns, but they're probably not useful.
Yeah. It's an interesting point because a lot of people almost state that as their AI plan, right? Like, oh, you know, we'll just collect all the data and then, you know, we're AI ready.
Yeah.
But it's normalizing the data and structuring the data is more important than just having
exactly
data.
And that's all logic.
Yes.
And you've got to know, I mean, one day maybe the AI will get to that point where it could work that out.
Yeah.
But today it's just not capable of doing that.
Yeah, interesting. The Go examples, it's a great one for like, you know, maybe you know the story better than I do, but the AI that first beat Go, one of the reasons that it won was because of almost like first principles thinking, where it didn't just do what the humans would do. So it was like if you were a human, a person learning how to play Go, and culturally you'd play it a certain way.
Yeah.
It didn't come with that legacy or that thinking. It's just like, well, what if I just played any way I can with still following the rules?
Yeah.
And it sort of went back to first principles, and then eventually
found another maxima or whatever, you know, because all AI really is a graph and trying to find the optimal result.
Yes.
In a 3D, well, you know, not 3D, you know, nth dimensional space.
Yeah.
So unvisualizable.
Yes.
But just found another high point effectively.
And that's almost an interesting like way to think of, well, what is AI good at? It's good at like exactly that, you know, like what's exciting about that fuzzy logic is it's not necessarily going to come up with what humans have if we had access to all the same APIs and, you know, wrote code and built an interface. It might take a different pathway we just wouldn't have thought of, which could lead to things that we wouldn't have done and increased efficiencies and and obviously it can also go the other direction and make mistakes along the way.
Or break your systems.
or break things, but it learns, you know, so it learns from what it does and won't make those mistakes if it gets the feedback it needs. So I guess I think this is actually an important topic. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it that much. Is logic versus AI, and the crossover and when to use one versus the other. So it should be one we, as an automation platform, that's very much about triggering actions. Like we're making those decisions when to use logic, when to use AI.
Yeah.
We're using both. So so it's something we should continue to share and think about.
Yeah. And I guess it comes down to most people don't want surprises. So in your everyday life, your meeting room or your lecture theater or whatever it is, you want it to work in the way you want it to work.
Yeah.
So if you're throwing in AI, you don't want it to do things differently just because someone misspoke or didn't quite emphasize something enough.
Yeah.
So effectively, you need limitations on the actions AI can do to make AI actually useful.
This all comes back to like design and scope. And, one of the things I wrote about recently, LinkedIn asked me to contribute to an article about UX. And I was talking about how there's a slight bias because we're all using these prototype tools like Figma or Adobe. Excuse me, Adobe XD, and they're all about. Sorry, I'm choking up. Very emotional. Adobe Figma and Adobe XD and Figma are all about wireframes, right? And it sort of makes that UX process very visual and app directed. There's not a way I've seen to start using those tools for prototyping voice interactions, AI interactions that go hand in hand with your visual interfaces. So it's like a whole learning curve, not just for the developers, the software developers, but it's got to start with the UX designers.
Yeah.
And for the UX designers to know what's possible, they need to learn a lot about AI and they learn even more tech than they have currently.
Yeah. Interestingly, I saw a good example of that with so I'm building the OpenAI GPT plugin for our system, so you don't need to actually open our interfaces. You just talk on ChatGPT, or Microsoft Copilot, and the OpenAI interface for configuring your plugin, it has the option of just using the AI.
Okay,
so it's a 2-tab screen where one tab is generate me a logo. It should look like this, and it generates logo and automatically assigns it to your app.
Yeah.
And then I guess you can get it to write detailed descriptions or something. But personally, I found the logo was a nice touch, just being able to throw something in there that looks nice. It's not our logo. I was like, I could go to the website and download the logo and put it on there, but whatever, I'll just get it to generate something interesting. Which might be all most people need. But then I found it was actually simpler to actually just enter the details in the fields. But the fact that you could do it all via AI was interesting and a good example of the actual UI being integrated with the AI.
Yeah, and these early, like these big companies like Microsoft giving AI tools to developers and how they've implemented that in terms of the applications and for the developers is probably what we'll borrow from when we're doing it in our own applications, right? Like people are still used to using mobile apps, so there's probably always going to be some level of visualization on a mobile device. But then you have the AI interface and the UX experience has to consider both. Microsoft's already considering both in that example. But designing for that, like with clients, that's where people need to upskill. That's where I'm seeing, even our partner companies, they're not going in scoping the chat experience. They're doing wireframes, rectangles, and buttons, and so that there's no opportunity to capture that AI input.
As soon as you want to do something complicated, that's often the lowest friction.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want to do something that might be complicated, but you want a simple version of it, then AI is probably better for you. And I think it's kind of analogous to when Microsoft added the like search bar into their start menu. So I feel like when Google came out, Microsoft started being like, oh, maybe search is the future. We're going to integrate search into everything.
Yeah.
But then I feel like Apple did it better with their Finder, and then Apple's use of Siri is probably a much better interface than, say, what Microsoft has done to date.
Yeah.
I feel like they should have kept Cortana around. I mean, obviously they killed it before OpenAI, which is a bit sad, I guess, because that would have been the perfect interface for all this Copilot stuff.
Well, they'll probably bring something else back.
Yeah,
they'll introduce something new.
But so far they've only introduced chat, like actual chat, which is interesting, versus voice. And I don't know if it's just because people don't like talking to their computers.
Yeah, not yet. I think that's inevitable. That's where it's going for a lot of our tasks. Like mostly because I personally, if you look at a previous episode, Geordie and I did with Pi AI. I legitimately use Pi AI all the time. I didn't just pick it up for the novelty of that podcast episode.
Yeah,
I talk to it like in my car instead of listening to a podcast. I'm like on basically a phone call with the AI.
Yeah.
So I can just ask it random questions as I'm driving around, and like it's as soon as you can do more in terms of action, I think that will be definitely baked into our operating systems.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Apple will just come out of the woodworks with that, right? Like that's the rumors. I mean, we're getting into like a proper AI podcast now, just speculating what Apple and Microsoft are going to do. But they are acquiring a whole bunch of companies, Apple, in AI. They already have Siri. They already have it embedded into their applications.
Yeah, and Siri's not very good, but they could. I assume they're working on something similar to ChatGPT.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very good. Like, it's not very conversational. It's still, can trigger things effectively. Like, the whole ecosystem is what's strong about it. Like, when I put in my AirPods, I can say, "Hey, play music."
Yeah,
like all that sort of stuff.
So it'll be super
we take for granted. Yeah,
but they just have to add a better language model on it.
Yeah,
probably more complicated than that. But
yeah.
If they do that, then it's already an ecosystem that people know how to use, and it's really good and well integrated into everything.
Yeah.
And sort of Microsoft went a bit backwards by removing Cortana, and now they're back to chat, and Apple's got this advantage, really.
And what's interesting to us is to monitor the operating systems, because that's what we want to integrate with.
Yeah, exactly.
So we don't want to have to deploy our apps onto everything. From day one, you and I were like, we're sort of anti-app in a way. We're about to publish an app in a couple of weeks, but that's not us backstepping on our message. That's just giving people options for different scenarios. For that case, mostly building access control.
Well, and you need the app to integrate into these voice systems anyway. So
yeah. But if you can zoom out to the operating system level, particularly for our workplace clients that already have like managed devices with Windows, and if we can tie into the Microsoft environment, then it's like just baked into everything. You don't have to go to like workplace app dot PwC.
Yeah, exactly. You've got Word open. It's got Copilot right there. You type in, book me a desk for tomorrow.
Yeah, which, there's so many like little edge cases that could be useful with like looking at an attendee list in Excel, and you use Copilot to then book a meeting with
invite these guests.
Exactly. Because the whole world still runs on Excel. As much as like Monday.com or whatever is like, are you still using Excel for sales or whatever? Like, yeah, because Excel's awesome. And it has Copilot built in.
Yeah. The killer app in the 80s and still the killer app.
It's still great. Let's end it like by praising Excel. I didn't expect that at the end of this episode. But thanks.